Alright, I thought we'd take a few minutes to do a summer update video on the Accord and just talk about some changes that I've made to the car in the last couple months and some future plans for the car. So we'll start here on the outside. I had some paint chips on the side here behind the door when I first bought the car. I think the car got egged at some point. That's what a few people have said. And so there was like a ring of paint chips here behind the door, and they're now gone. I was able to get it repaired, fortunately, and so it looks a lot better now from the side. And unfortunately they left a bunch of white dust and crap all over the window and inside the fuel door and everything, but I'm glad that the paint chips are gone now on this side at least. So that's really nice to have that kind of all repaired and everything. And I think I had the painted chrome strip in the last video, so that hasn't really changed. I did paint the engine cover. It's like a silver and black theme now with some red lettering. Looks really cool. And so we'll go inside the car here, and I've done some vinyl wrap on the trim. I have not gotten on to doing the doors yet, and I probably won't, which I'll explain later on. But I did the dashboard and the console, and I think it looks really cool. So in direct sunlight you can definitely tell it's fake, but in low light, or if it's not in sunlight, it looks really nice. It's a dark shade of like a fine grain wood, and I just think it gives the car kind of a more classy appearance inside. I really like the look of it. So I also installed some under dash ambient lighting, which I'll show you in just a second. So you can see the wood grain here, and then it's also over here and throughout the center console. These two pieces were just regular black plastic, and it looked really boring. So I thought I'd spice it up, and I started the wood grain down here and then just kind of carried it through on the dashboard. And I'm really pleased with it. I think it looks really nice, especially with the silver plastic trim here on each side. Looks really cool. And then if we go ahead and start it up, you can see my ambient lighting. So it's in both footwells, and it's in here, which is really cool. It's very, very bright in the storage bin here. So you can see that in the daylight. Not so much the footwells, but definitely up here you can see in the daylight. And at night it looks really, really cool. I'm glad I did it. And I went with the red because the gauges are red. The audio system is red, so it just kind of fit with the theme of the car, especially having the outside be red as well. It just kind of fit, really. So I think it looks really nice, and I'm very pleased with it. I have 48,366 miles on it. I did an oil change and tire rotation a couple weeks ago, and so I got my about 5,000 miles out of the last oil change. And I'm actually taking the car on a pretty substantial road trip in a couple weeks, so I think I'm going to tape off the front end, kind of road rally style, if you will, to prevent paint chips and whatnot. And I'll be really excited to take this car on its first real road trip. It'll be nice. Okay, so about a month into the ownership of this car, I started to realize maybe this really isn't the vehicle for me. I know that I bought this car because I thought I've always wanted one of these. They're pretty rare. It would be something really nice to have. And I'm still glad that I bought it so I can have that experience. But let's be honest, having a coupe is impractical, and this thing is huge. So it's a very big car, but you have very little space you can actually use inside the car. The back seat is terrible to get in and out of because every time you tumble the passenger seat forward, it doesn't return to the same place it was at when you put it back. And on the driver's seat, just the backrest leans forward, and it doesn't give you much room to get in and out of the back seat. So you could really only use the front seat. And having just two seats in a car this big doesn't really fly very well with me. And I also found the seats uncomfortable after owning it for a while. So it's not something I noticed initially. It's something that kind of came up over time. It's just that my body type doesn't really fit in these seats very well. I thought, oh, they're nice and big, they'll be comfortable, they'll be nice and comfy to sit in, but they're really not. They just don't have the right cushion in the right places for me, and they don't hold you in very well either. You just kind of slide around very easily, especially because they're leather, so it's very slick, kind of, if that makes sense. So when you're driving the car hard, you just kind of like slide around everywhere, and I really am not a huge fan of that. So these are just a couple things I noticed over time, and I just started to realize this isn't a car that I want to keep a long time, especially as a daily driver. If I had something else more practical, let's say a Ridgeline, let's say I had a few-year-old Ridgeline with some miles on it, and I drove that every day, I'd be happy to keep this car. Or maybe have like an S2000 or a Miata. I'd be happy with a fun two-seater car, but this being my daily driver, I'm not really completely sold on that idea. I'm glad I bought it because I wanted to have the extra power over the SI, and I'm glad that I got to experience that at least for a little bit, especially since I still really like the 9th Gen Accord Coupe, and I've always wanted to own one ever since these first came out, like 3 or 4 years ago, but I'm just starting to realize that's not kind of the car I want for a daily driver, especially for a long time. So about a month into the ownership of this car, I went out for a test drive in a Mazda 3 2.5 liter 6-speed manual, and I loved it. It was great until we got to the test drive. I just found the shifter to be clunky. It didn't have a very quality feel to it, and the clutch pedal was insanely light. Anytime you go near it, it would just slam down to the ground, and I didn't like that at all. It just didn't give me a very confident feeling when I was driving it. And also, for having 185 horsepower in a car that small, it felt very, very slow. So I can't imagine the automatic would be any better in that regard, so I kind of ruled that one out completely. Then a few weeks ago, I decided to go check out the turbocharged Civic, because I'd only driven the LX before, and I'd only been around the LX, so I kind of got a flavor of the base model, and that was about it. So I went to the dealership thinking I just want to check it out and see what it's like, and then I ended up finishing up the test drive really wanting that car, and when we got done with the test drive, my wife actually asked me, "Are you serious about buying this car?" And I said, "Yeah, I am now." So we looked at the EXL, and I drove the EXT, and I determined the EXL is just a little more than I want to spend, and I don't necessarily want the leather seats, because that's one complaint that I have with this car, is I thought they breathed nicely because they were perforated, but they still get incredibly hot and sticky in the summer. So I would prefer cloth, but leather is okay. I don't have a problem with leather, but after having leather now, I kind of prefer cloth just a little bit. So the EXT Civic has the cloth seats, and it's about $2,000 cheaper than the EXL. Then I went this past Saturday with a friend of mine to a few different dealerships. We had a great time, spent a good portion of the day test driving cars and eating at Buffalo Wild Wings and whatnot. So we test drove the Civic again. I actually got 3 test drives in of that vehicle, and I really determined it's a great car, but then I went and test drove the Hyundai Veloster Turbo, and I was completely blown away. I was not expecting it to be that good. It sounded really nice. They updated the gauge cluster for 2016 in the Turbo, and it looks awesome. And it had a great infotainment system, awesome sound system. It was wonderful. The perfect size, had plenty of power, and the dual clutch transmission was actually pretty nice. It was a little sluggish to get going off the line, but once you got going, it changed gear very quickly, and the shifts were nice and smooth. So got back from the test drive and started working numbers. It just came out to be too much for me at this point right now. That one was a pretty highly spec'd up model, and it had the awesome orange and black interior, which was really cool. And the outside of the car is called Vitamin C, which is even awesomer. Awesomer? Is that a word? It is now. It was even more awesome. So it just happened to be too much in that specification that I wanted to spend. And to get to the amount I would want to spend on a Veloster Turbo, I have to kind of forego a lot of the equipment that I want. So I couldn't get the sunroof, I couldn't get the push-button start, and I'd probably have to get the manual transmission, which is okay, but I really do like that dual clutch. But I have to go with the manual because of the price. And I just kind of thought about it a little bit here and there, and I don't know that I want a Hyundai because the resale value isn't very good, and there's a lot of hard plastics in the interior, and I just feel like that'll get a lot of rattles and whatnot over time. It's a car that is very cool, very awesome, but I don't think it's something that I'd be completely satisfied with over time. I think it would grow old very quickly, especially because of the poor resale value. So I liked it, but it's not something I would really want to buy right now. Then we also looked at the Mark 7 GTI, and I honestly was not a huge fan of it. I told the salesperson, hey, I don't think this is the car for me, and she kind of whispered to my friend, oh, that's weird. So I really didn't like it, and I know that's kind of an odd thing to say about the GTI. The seats weren't very comfortable. They had a lot of lumbar support down low, so I felt like I was sitting like this the whole time with my head back and my stomach sticking out, and it was at the least firm setting. And I also just didn't like the way it felt on the road. It didn't feel special driving around town like it did with my Civic Si. The Civic Si was exciting at any speed. Even though it wasn't super fast, it was just a fun car to drive. And driving the GTI normally, it just felt too normal. It didn't feel exciting at all. And when you kind of got into it a little bit, I just didn't like the way the engine sounded. It sounded like it was burping all the time. It just didn't sound good. And so I kind of wrote off the GTI for those reasons. It's not something I would really like to have. So I finally decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for the 2017 Civic to come out with a turbo engine, and I'm going to go order one, as long as they can get to the payments that I need, which I think they can. I've already gotten pretty close without doing much negotiating at all. So once I'm ready to buy something, I know that they will give me the deal that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go back to the place I went to this past Saturday, because I was treated really nicely there, and the salesman seemed pretty willing to help me out. So I'm going to go back there, and I'm just going to say, hey, if you can get to such and such payment for such and such term, and no more than this interest rate, then I'll do it. And then I'll just have to order it or whatever, because I do want the manual transmission with the turbo engine. I thought I would be okay with a CVT, and that's why I did so many drives in the Civic, just to be sure, but I'm really not thinking that's something I want long term. It's okay, but I think it would get very boring after a while having that CVT. So I'm going to wait a few months till the 17 Civics come out, and I'm going to try to order a Civic Turbo with a stick shift. I've already got a list of modifications and upgrades I want to make. Nothing major yet. I'd really like to get that new Honda reflash they just came out with. I think that would be awesome. And I want a set of summer tires. I want a set of winter tires. I want a carbon fiber wrap the interior trim with vinyl. And I also would like to do the 9th Gen SI shift knob, or I might just put my Acura knob on there. Just depends. And then I've contacted Redline Goods. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of them, but they do leather accessories for cars. They mainly specialize in shift boots, but they also do armrests and steering wheels and whatnot. They have some really, really cool stuff. I really wanted to get a few things from them for my SI, but I ended up trading it for the Accord. And they don't really have anything that I think would look good in this car, just with kind of what I'm going for with it. So I'm definitely going to contact them about the Civic. In fact, I've already emailed them and said, hey, I know you guys don't have anything for this car yet, but I'm planning to buy one very soon, and I would like some of your parts for my vehicle. So we've started collaborating to create some parts for the 10th Gen Civic, and it's going to be really awesome. I'm honestly a little surprised they don't have anything out yet, and they said they haven't really had much interest in it. So hopefully that won't change by the time I get my car, because if it stays at the current status, I guess, if they don't have anything available, I can send them whatever parts I want in leather for free, and they will do it for free to whatever specifications I want. So I told them I want a black leather, and I want the faux carbon fiber vinyl stripe down the middle to match the seats, and they would do that. And the only requirement is that I have to put down a refundable deposit. It's refundable as soon as they get my parts, and I have to take photos of the installation process, which is freaking awesome. So I'm very, 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 very excited about the Redline Goods. So I'm going to do the armrest, the shift boot, and I'd like to do the steering wheel in leather, but I might just get the OEM Honda steering wheel rim from the EXL. And then at some point I'd really like to do the armrest on the doors and probably the door panels, but that's a lot kind of to do at once. So I'm just going to start off with the armrest and the shift boot, send them that, I get my deposit back, have it wrapped in black leather with the carbon fiber stripe down the middle, throw it back on the car, and kind of run with that for a little while until I get around to disassembling the door panel and get the parts I want off of that. So I'm incredibly excited about working with Redline Goods, and hopefully we can put together some kind of collaboration there to get some parts out for the 10th Gen Civic. Then I'd also like to do the Hyundai reflash, which I mentioned, and probably an in-gen cold air intake, not a short ram. It would be a true cold air intake. And I'd like to debadge the rear, just take off the Civic emblem, make it look a little bit cleaner. So those are kind of my plans right now. I don't plan on keeping the Accord super long, as I just mentioned, and I'm going to enjoy it while I got it. Probably make a few more videos with it, and hopefully then it'll be going away and I'll be getting a brand new Civic. Also, part of the motivation in getting a new Civic is the insurance on this car is expensive. Like, I thought the SI was a lot, but this is almost $40 more a month, and that's even more than they quoted me when I gave them the VIN number for this car before I bought it. So I'm kind of fed up with that. And I know the insurance on just an EX Civic would be quite a bit less than either this or the SI. So I'd much rather put that money towards a car and actually have something kind of to show for it, basically, instead of just putting it towards insurance. So that's kind of also a bit of a motivation factor for me in buying the Civic. So if you have any questions, post them below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned, because I'm definitely planning on making a few more videos of this car before I get rid of it.